Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gate shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Every time I read that, I honestly get choked up on it because to me, it expresses the best of America. It's the best thing, one of the best things we ever did. And right now, I think some people say we're at a point where democracy is being challenged. We may be on a trajectory to a different kind of governing state. And I think a reminder of the fact that most of us, are immigrants. We've been here just a little bit longer than some others, but it's important to start with that before we get into the nitty gritty of how things happen. So why don't we begin by just, give us your feelings about immigration, and then we'll talk a little bit about ideas. Who'd like to start?
I will.
Go ahead, Stan.
First of all, I'm sorry to say I haven't read any of those wonderful links that you sent. But I know that anti-immigration is not something new to this country, as you know. There was a time when there were no law. You just came, you showed up, and then they started clarifying what it means to be an American citizen with the 14th and 15th Amendments, I think. I remember one or both anyway. And there wasn't any laws about immigration until 1880s when they had the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Right.
The people in California didn't, they wanted the Chinese to come and work in the railroad, but they didn't like them being American citizens. So they started limiting the number of Chinese who could come. That was the first really immigration laws there were. And then it's interesting, with the populist movement in the late 19th century, there was also the Know Nothing Party. And part of populism was anti-immigration. And so somehow those things go hand in hand. It might have something to do with nationalism, and I don't know. But so this is not new to this country. And when was Lazarus? When did she write that poem? Do you know?
It seems to me it was in the 20s, but I don't know.
Was it specifically for the Statue of Liberty?
Well, obviously it was about that, but whether it was intended to be the plaque or not, I'm not sure. Maybe someone can educate me about that. But.
Yeah, but anyway, it was the mid 19th century when the Know Nothings were around, right after the Civil War.
Right.
And they were very much anti-immigrant. And of course, that goes hand in hand with white Christian nationalism, which is rearing its ugly head again. Yeah. So I think anti-immigration is not special to this time. It's been here before. I feel a little phony spouting off here, but having not read any of this stuff, but I know that there are problems. I understand that the current influx of immigrants are people from Venezuela fleeing economic and oppression and failed state, and and things, could be done. But my fear is that our politics, I mean, basically, our politics are such that it would be impossible to, unless the Democrats had a what do you call it? Filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and a majority in the House. Only then could we get any kind of legislation that would remedy immigration. But right now, immigration is being used as it's not. The Republicans don't want to talk about immigration as a problem to solve. They just want to use it as something to rally the base and to beat up Democrats with. So it's just too politically toxic. But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Well,
I'm going on long enough.
But I'm interested in getting your feelings about it as well. We'll talk about some of the details and
I feel like as a Christian, I feel like, welcome the stranger. I feel like I'm just volunteering with the help. There's a resettlement center for refugees right outside of Atlanta, in our church. We work with these different groups. So I'm going to be taking some Iranians to the grocery on Monday. That's going to be my first, and so I'm getting involved with working with, and these are people that have waited years in refugee camps, and they're part of a program. The government, they let in so many refugees every year, and these are these people. So they're perfectly legal. They're very legit and stuff. So I'm interested to see what I can learn from these folks and how they're settling in.
Yeah,
but
that should be interesting. Steve?
I think I love the sentiments of that poem, like you, and but I know that there are some problems that need to be solved. But I just don't know how we can do it in this people climate. Anyway.
Let's go around the circle here so we don't get into too many details at the beginning. Steve, just some initial feelings about this. I'm really interested initially in the kind of your emotional reaction to it before we talk about the details.
Well, I've always had a strong impression of being a descendant of immigrants. My paternal grandfather was, I think he was the sixth of 7 children, and only he and his younger brother were born here in the U.S. The rest of the family was born in Switzerland, which is where they were. My grandmother on that side, my maternal grandmother, her mother spoke German more than she spoke English. And I remember her, she died when I was about 5 or 6, but I remember her as being kind of scary. So I don't know this person's foreign language. But as I grew up, I always thought of myself as a German Swiss, influence. My father being a Smith, and his mother being a foster child who didn't know her parents. I didn't know too much about his ancestry, but looked that up a bit in Ancestry.com and could see the Smith, his father's side of the family, had come into Maryland, and then the succeeding generation had moved to Virginia, and then another generation to West Virginia, and another generation to Kentucky, and then in the middle of Kentucky, and then to Louisville. Yeah. So you can see just by where these people were born, how they moved across the U.S. So my feeling has always been, immigrants are us. It's a part of us. And funny you mentioned, Stan, the refugee resettlement. For years, I worked in the agency in the Department of Health and Human Services that housed the Office of Refugee Resettlement.
Oh, really?
And so I'm very familiar with those programs. The people who worked in that office were from all over the world.
Yeah.
They became U.S. citizens, but wanted to work in areas where they were, helping other refugees. So I was familiar with people from Vietnam, the Hmong tribe, Cuba, India, and Asian countries, from all across the world working in this agency that was trying to get the money out to the local organizations to help with the resettlement.
Mm.
So, a lot of years. I never worked directly in that office, but I gave them administrative support and budget support, and so worked very closely with them.
Larry, your feelings about the topic before we delve into it.
Well, it is just like the rest of you guys, the idea of where we came from is very real in my life. And my grandmother's parents came from Switzerland, German-speaking Swiss folks, and I grew up across the street from her and lived in a part of town called Germantown, and which is an area that recently I've come to realize that there was actually riots there sometime in the early 20th century where Protestant majorities attacked, and I think there was some killing and some burning that took place somewhere in that vicinity, just as a result of just xenophobia on people that were different than them and spoke differently than them. My maternal great-grandfather was a master cabinet builder, and I still have a piece of furniture, a very ornate piece of a table that he made that and I have no idea how one could make that something that precise and that decorative with the tools that he had. He made a whole set, things like that. So that resonates for me back to the heritage there. I think that historically speaking, as Stan said, the immigrants have always been demonized, even if they if they were ethnically different, certainly, but even if they were religiously different or came from a different part of Europe, unless you showed up in the community that was like you, if you were a Quaker or you were a Puritan or if you were a member of the English aristocracy that drifted over this way or from backcountry, wherever, you were not welcomed. You were probably going to be pushed out to someplace else or segregated in some fashion. The Irish certainly suffered that same fate. So it's been to say that we welcome immigrants is probably, we welcome them later on when they marry our daughter. That's about as close as that gets. And eventually they integrate and things fade away. And I think we're less of a melting pot than a big bowl of soup. Just chili or something, just an amalgamation of all this stuff. We don't think we've lost the character of our ancestral ingredients, and it is a shame that the right has conducted such character assassination on the people that are coming into the country at this point in time. I was at a large birthday party last Saturday and met a guy who's actually lives down the street and around the corner from us. I hadn't met before. He was an immigrant from Venezuela, and he's married an American person. He came here when he was a student. He was probably in his late 40s now. He came here as a student, went to Canada first, then went to school in the United States. Ended up getting he changed schools without permission of the immigration folks, and so they deported him, and he had to stay outside the country for 10 years, during which time he met his wife, who's American, was in Venezuela, and they came back here and they've settled here and brought some family over since then. He's an example of a great citizen, really an impressive man, and that we miss out on these people so much. Through stupid laws and stupid policies and just generally being stupid.
Stupid. Dave, this was your suggested topic, so I'm assuming that you have some strong feelings about this. Give us your emotional response to the idea of immigration.
Hey. Well, I'm probably the weirdo among you guys, being of total Bohemian and a bit of Moravian ancestry, Czech. or Czechoslovak. I had the ideal city family and country family. My dad's people, Vislisels and Brolics, were all farmers. And they were sent to Iowa, I think, for obvious reasons. They decided to settle Czechs in there because, it was great farming country, and they looked to develop it probably starting around I think the Vislisels, somewhere around 1880, they came. The city people, the Dvořáks and the Smetana side of the family. Grandpa was a tailor, and they lived in, Cedar Rapids was the second largest city in Iowa, and a mere probably 50,000 people when I was growing up. So to call it a city is not to, it could be raise eyebrows with you Louisvillians who have always, you live in a city. I didn't really. At any rate, but I really don't want to talk so much about that. I'll tell you what, in this whole thing, I keep wondering if the United States has an immigration policy, really. If so, I can't figure out what the hell it is. It really disturbs me and conflicts me in the balance that we face between a porous border, which I think really needs to be somehow sealed enough to have a port of entry where we can deal humanely and reasonably and sensibly with our immigrants. Canada has a policy. If you come there, you can come, but you're not allowed to stay if you don't have a sponsor or a profession or a trade or a talent, because you won't fit in. Now, how they deport those people or how they govern that entrance, I don't know. But, it seems to me that America really needs something like that to say, wouldn't it be great if people coming through the border, if they weren't strictly refugees, political refugees, could have some sort of assigned sponsor who could help them along the way to adjust, to get the services and the food and the shelter, et cetera, that they need, and some assimilation. But between the porous border and the craziness that happens on the south, on our southern border with Mexico, it's a mess. And I don't think there's really a policy that has been developed to deal with all that. And so to me, it's a balance, and this is really an emotional thing. There has got to be a balance between how we admit people. So, we don't have thousands and millions, and how we absorb them properly. It's like, a place to stay, but if you're ending up homeless, you're ending up miserable, you're ending up starving, that's no good. So that's kind of my major dilemma. What is the US policy? How can we figure out a policy? How can we balance between a kind of gateway that is humane, humanistic, projects and gives loving kindness to people who want to come here and need to come here. Mm-hmm. God knows we can absorb millions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the crime, that we don't recognize that we ought to be raising that limit into the million or two per year rather than the thousands. And, mm-hmm. Through Trump at one point, it was 15,000 only. Now, that doesn't account for, that's the Mexican gate, I think. You got all these political refugees coming across. You got them coming out of Europe, out of, Afghanistan. We've moved them in. Think of all the places that we've had emergency because of stuff we've been involved in. We have imported those people and we've tried to settle them. That's extra. around the news is 125,000 people is what Biden has settled on the southern border for this coming year. 125. Well, it's better than 15,000 like Trump, but it's, you know, it's a tiny fraction of what we ought to be letting in. So that's my feelings about it all.
One of the links that I sent to you was an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and I think he does an excellent job. I don't know if you're fans of his or not, but I am. Of course, he is an immigrant, so he was speaking from personal knowledge about the experience he had. And he kind of laid out a pattern for this. There are 4 basic ways that someone can get into this country as an immigrant. It's through a family connection. And there's a lot of hype about this. It's one of the big ironies is Donald Trump made a big deal out of chain immigration, where there's someone comes here and then they sponsor someone else, et cetera. Well, guess what Melania Trump did? She brought her parents in here and they've got citizenship. So there's a lot of hypocrisy about the whole deal. But the truth is you have to have a sponsor. It can bring in a spouse, a child, a parent, or a sibling, and that's it. They can't sponsor people at random. The right oftentimes misrepresents this, that they talk about legal immigration and then expand it into nonsense. The other way is through employment. And for employment, you have to be sponsored by an employer. So you basically have to have a job before you show up. You can't come here. Or you can get a temporary work visa. And that's for specified types of folks. They'll let in religious workers. They'll let in athletes, farm workers on occasion, and people with special skills.
Students
Students as well. But the third way, he says it's good luck, and that's on the diversity visa lottery. There's a lottery that he gave figures for 2016. Said there were 22 million applicants for that lottery, and 50,000 were awarded. So that's 0.23%, 1/4 of people. And then the last way is through bad luck, which is refugees and asylum seekers. So the idea, which is often fostered, is, well, we believe in legal immigration and we support legal immigration. You have to stand in line like everybody else, and you have to, follow the rules. Well, we haven't approved anyone from Mexico since 1997 who was an asylum seeker or a refugee. We've shuffled them in, but the point of it is, if you're trying to follow the rules, you may have a 25-year wait to get in, according to our process. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that we just don't like these people jumping the fence and coming over the border. we don't want these folks unless they're going to do us some good. And I don't know how to segue that here into a conversation, but what do you hear in the media about immigration that you either accept or reject? What are some of the things that have occurred to you? Stan?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for apologizing.
No.
As I understand, a lot of the people that are being jerked around by these Republican governors are people who, I'm not sure if they cross the border legally or illegally, but they do turn themselves in, and they enter into the process of having their a hearing as refugees. They're seeking asylum, but the problem is that there's not enough people to hear those cases, and and some people blame Biden for not pushing for more funding. Some people say, well, it's because the Republicans just aren't going to support any of that, so forget it. But there's that. And then there was a, you know, at one time Bush proposed a guest worker program when he was president.
Yeah.
And that's when the Tea Party, who the new nativists, said, no, no way, we don't want these people. And so he couldn't get any Republican support for that. And another thing I learned just watching stuff online was that a lot of Mexicans that and Central Americans that came over here in the 80s and 90s, they came to work for work in the and the meat processing plants, the massive farms. They needed this labor, and they were happy to come in and then make some money and go back to Mexico. And they were happy to do that because the border was, they could cross back and forth with no problem. No one was stopping them. No one was holding them up. They could legally cross and legally go back. And then I think in 1990 or something, there was a new rage of nativism, and they passed laws that made it difficult for people to come back and forth. And so they needed the money. And so instead of going back and forth, they just stayed illegally in the United States because it was too much trouble. They would gladly have gone home and then come back, you know. And so that was a major screw up.
What they also did, Stan, is that since they were trapped here, they couldn't go back for fear of not being able to come back again. They snuck their families over into the same situation.
Yeah. So it seems like the politics, it's just, I don't know, the politics defies rational responses to this problem. And I just want to say one more little story. I was we drive back and forth to Charlotte from Atlanta because I have a daughter there and she has a new child and everything. And one time I was stopping in South Carolina, not known for its liberal politics, and I'm going to get gas. And I was waiting to use the bathroom, and there was another guy there. And I don't know, I guess they had the TV on. It was about, I think it was right after COVID, when there was a period where people were having trouble getting workers recently. And this good old boy says, you know what, there's all these people want to get in the country, and they can't find enough people to work these jobs. Why don't we just bring them in, train them, and put them to work? I said,
Yeah.
You're now liberal.
How can you say that and not have a cross burned in your front yard? But you know, there is a certain logic to this that the politics just won't let it happen. You know, just won't. It's tuned out. That's what drives me crazy. The politics.
One of the things
politics is the art of the possible, right? So right now it's impossible.
One of the things that I've learned just recently as a result of having this being a topic, so I went and looked up what are these classifications all about, especially these folks, the Venezuelan folk and that, is that they're here legally. If you show up at the border and you ask for asylum, you are covered under U.S. immigration policy, and you have 1 year to actually apply for that status. So in the meantime, you're just doing whatever, which is, kind of crazy. If you come here as a refugee, it means that you are in a country other than your own, and it's not our country, and you qualify under some aspect of the United Nations definition of what a refugee is, and you passed all of their criteria, and you can enter the U.S. as a refugee, which there are far fewer than that or anything else. And you are then eligible for various types of resources and support. So you've sort of been pre-screened someplace else. But all these asylum seekers that are just here and wandering around are still waiting for a totally inadequate system to adjudicate their status.
Right.
And the fact that you are not adjudicating them, we can't adjudicate them because there's no resources, not enough judges or whatever. Is the real tragedy, and they're stuck here, and they become the poster child of the right.
Yeah,
you demonize them.
Yeah.
Tell me, what would you guys say about people who are working? They're in unions. They're tradespeople of various kinds. My understanding is that generally they have not been very supportive of. Although they tend to be pretty liberal, the unions. They are not real happy to see people coming in who might or might not, depending on whose statistics you're following. They're fearful of having other people take over their jobs and disturb that. I'm looking at a poll here that was taken. What is it? IBD tip poll of 1,000 and 1,500 Americans roughly just taken. What's the most important issue in the country today? 32% say the economy. And that's completely understandable. Are we going into a depression? Am I going to lose my job? Will we recover from COVID? All of that stuff it's all swimming. Or I'm sick and tired of that. I'm gonna take off, and now my benefits have run out, my unemployment, and what? The next group that was 32%, 15% gun violence and gun control. And these are Republicans and Democrats balanced and independents. Then Russia, Ukraine situation. No, lack of trust in government politicians. You'd think that'd be about 90%.
Shock.
In this
Shock.
poll, it's about 10%. Then down to coronavirus continues to be a 5%. Immigration and border security, 5%, one other 5% climate change, and the rest are 3, 2, and 1 or less. So what I'm positing here is it seems that the American public has got a very low concern about the immigration problem. I don't know what that means in terms of pushing the government to solve it, as opposed to just saying, well, you're doing the best you can. We know we got a mess there. Or, most people think, oh, we probably got some kind of immigration policy. There's probably some illegals around, but, it's not a big deal. So those things are significant. Here's another thing that I got to thinking about. The number of particularly European countries, not necessarily, they're both the Western European countries and the liberated or freed old communist USSR countries. They are turning, starting with Viktor Orban, extremely reactionary, extremely almost dictatorial. Poland is not too far behind. The Czech Republic, Slovakia, then into Europe, we've got an Italian prime minister who's either just been elected or probably will be, who has turned extremely conservative. We're fencing them out. We're pushing those boats coming across the Mediterranean and from the Middle East away. And then even France and Spain has been really pretty open. They're beginning to tighten up, to say nothing of Britain, who with their conservative, and they say that a lot of this, and Sweden has come up with a very anti-immigrant policy. So this is a worldwide situation. Where are these people going to go, and how it's triggering as a world problem? It seems to be getting massive as there's more starvation, there's more war, there's more drought, there's more floods. There's more, all of that people are pouring out of other countries looking for asylum, looking for help, looking for a reasonable life somewhere the hell else than where they are. And often reluctantly, because, they're leaving their homelands, their families, everything they know. This is a massive world problem.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you say, well, we're the tip of the iceberg. Maybe we're a small part of the iceberg at this time, but all those things I react to emotionally, humanely. How do we get on top of this? I don't know that there's any solution. I rest there.
Come on now, we're supposed to.
Oh, you want me to go on?
No.
No,
I
I want you to come
okay.
up with a solution.
Larry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Stan's point a few minutes ago about how the emotions surrounding this topic have been so ginned up, particularly since Trump came on the scene. That was his opening line
Oh, yeah.
right off the bat. And I listened to a Fox News interviewing a congressman from New Jersey the other day.
Yeah.
And he was all down into this. It was mostly there's the pictures of the Venezuelan families, women and children getting off the bus. And in the background, he was talking about how they were drug rapists and drug dealers and murderers and such. And all these little kids
harvesting organs. Yeah, I remember that.
and he's the guy is from New Jersey, which probably has, next to New York, probably the second number of immigrants in their population. So it's been so politicized, and it's hard to think that it used to be a local issue. It would be in the Southwest, where people were because they were running across their backyards and their farms. It's become a national issue now, and it's so toxic. It's almost insolvable.
I wanted to share some ideas. I talked with Dustin earlier this evening. Larry, Dustin used to join us in these conversations, and I don't know what his reason is for not being here. I don't know, but he has it. But I asked him, what his thinking was, and he talked about the first thing he talked about was the demographic difference, that we have an aging population here, like us, and if we don't have significant number of younger people coming in, we're not going to be able to fund Social Security and other programs. So that's something that was on his mind as a somewhat younger person in his 40s. He said we use cheap labor. We've done it for years. We bring people in. Even now, after DeSantis ran the people up to Martha's Vineyard, he now has to allow people to come in to help clean up after so you need them now. So come on back.
Wow.
Yeah.
He also in Congress he spoke against hurricane relief for Hurricane Sandy when it hit the Northeast, and now he's begging. I like Jimmy. What's one of the late night hosts? He said it's like DeSantis is like the bully, who suddenly just realizes he needs help with his math homework.
Right.
A nerdy kid he's been kicking around saying, "Oh, excuse me, but I'm sorry." But really
the last thing I just want to finish with what Dustin was the last comment he made, which is I was kind of surprised and gratified in a way. He said, "Do we really believe in democracy?" So if you really believe in democracy, you want everybody's vote to count, and you want everybody to have an opportunity. So that kind of cut through the maze for me. It's like, I remember, I don't know what your remembrance of this is, but when we only had 48 stars on the flag, we were talking about admitting Alaska and Hawaii to the Union. This was back in 1958, 59. And at that time, it was, we want to expand. We want to grow the country bigger. And then in the mid 60s, I guess it was, they started talking about Puerto Rico, and they wanted to give statehood to Puerto Rico. Well, no. Life is all right in America if you're white in America, right? And I remember I was 10 years old, 11 years old then, I guess, and I always thought, well, maybe we'll start granting statehood to lots of different places in South America, and the United States will just grow into a giant, colossal empire of individual states. Well, we stopped that, and I think it's basically it's a racist thing.
You've got to find a lot of right-wing countries or territories to offset what they perceive to be the left-wing countries that you're letting in.
Yeah.
Hawaii and Alaska got in because they offset each other in the Senate.
Yeah.
True. Like Maine and Missouri. Yeah.
Well,
I'd like to submit one other, slug in the machinery. And that's that we are right now, because of COVID, because of supply chain problems, inflation, but mainly the abandonment of people who were working in so many different areas, arenas, professions, and crafts and the like, that they've abandoned their jobs. So we're begging right now, because we are not, we're not in any kind of depression. Salaries are going up. The pressure to get people to come in and do stuff, from teachers to medical people to roofers. I've been trying to find somebody to respond to me for an asphalt little job I need. And I can't even get any of the 4 or 5 companies I've called to call me back. So we are in a period of, you want a job, you can probably get it, and you can probably do pretty well, meaning at least 15 to 20 bucks an hour. There are jobs aplenty right now, even at McDonald's in many cases. What happens when we seem to be sliding into a recession, and maybe much deeper than we expect? Right now, we need the workers. But if you have a lot of people coming in to work, what happens to the reaction against immigrants coming in of any kind if suddenly your job is threatened? Suddenly there's a shrinkage. Suddenly you're just barely hanging on to your job. That's another factor that's coming ahead that's going to influence, immigration, at least public reaction, perhaps. I don't know. And I still come back to this poll in which a mere 5% of the folks think that that's a major problem. That 5% of them would put it as maybe the major problem. Minuscule, it seems to me, and that's why I honestly don't know anybody who complains about immigration. I just don't know anybody. So are the politicians using this? Is this anything people really care about? I don't know. I ask you, I guess.
Well, there's obviously not been a consensus in the Congress and in the Senate to come up with a comprehensive immigration bill. In fact, our Congressman Mazzoli years ago was, I think, sponsored the last one that actually got any traction in the House. So it's not because it's mainly a straw man issue. I think, as Stan was saying, they're not really looking for a solution. They're complaining about it like we complain about the weather or something. They're not really trying to solve the problem.
Or it's a political tool that parties use, or yeah.
Well, we're right about at 8 o'clock. I find this a fascinating topic because I think it brings out, if you talk to other people about the subject, it will bring out some of their feelings irrespective of facts. They'll talk about how they feel about it. That's why I wanted to start that way. They talk about how they feel about it more so than quoting the numbers. Yeah. And even though, they want to accuse Biden of having open borders, he's deporting as many people as the guy before him did, maybe more. So yeah, it doesn't matter what party's in.
Has he beat Obama's deportation record?
No.
he was called the deporter in chief.
That would be hard to do.
Tells you that, but supposedly Obama deported more than Bush.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah.
Oh.
No. Well, anyway, that's interesting. I'd take a look, if you want to follow up on this. Take a look at that John Oliver.
Yeah.
I think he does a good job of it.
He is so good. He's
very funny.
He lays it out. He's so logical. He's great. Just, well, of course, he probably has a staff of 100 people who are doing the research for him.
Right.
But
and I would also call your attention. I mentioned to you last time the the alt-right playbook. This is a series of YouTube
Oh, right.
alt
All right.
playbook by a guy named Ian Danskin, and you'll find him there. That's Innuendo Studios is the name of it.
Innuendo.
Yeah,
I'm
there's
going to do that right now.
there's one in particular that he does some things to try to define how these types of conversations go on. And he illustrates it very well, so I'd recommend those to you as
You
well.
sent us is that the one you sent us a link to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Alt-right playbook.
All
So
right.
once
Have any
again,
thoughts for next time?
for next week, I'm open.
Yeah.
All
All right.
Something pressing? It's it's almost election time.
I read an article about the violent rhetoric that's being ginned up on the right wing. Marjorie Taylor Greene is continuously referred to the Biden administration as the Biden regime.
Mhm.
And a lot of other right-wing people in Congress are picking up this terminology. And what it implies is that, along with the election denying, all that implies is that this is a illegitimate government, and we as a people have a right to take arms against a government, against a government that is not, not legitimate. And it's a little frightening, and that the rhetoric gets more and more violent as that's what the point of this.
I would throw one thing. This is something that is mentioned in one of these videos that I talked about in the alt-right playbook. An example would be there's a speaker who's invited to come speak at a liberal college. He's a right-wing speaker, and normally he goes to the college and there's a protest, and the protest gets the local news folks in. So the kids in the college decide, we're just going to ignore him. We're not going to have a protest. And so he's saying, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to get any press. So he ups the rhetoric. He says, I'm going to start outing some of your gay students here, and I'm other things just to bait them into it. And I think that's what people like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She's not getting on Fox News enough. She's Annie, so she'll get her picture there. Yeah. And I don't think it's any more than that. I
was real quick. I was driving home from whenever I was in Lexington last week, and a friend anyway, and I was driving home, and the drive back from Kentucky to Georgia, you have to go through that northeast corner that's Marjorie Taylor Greene's home base. And I saw a sign saying, it's a biblical quote. I'm not going to get it right, but all people will declare that Jesus is Lord. And so it's a big, they have these posters everywhere. They have these billboards everywhere in Georgia. And so it's a big billboard, and that Jesus is Lord. That's in big print, and then the small print is all people sometime will recognize this, and then in small print below that it says even Democrats.
of course.
So we are atheistic. We're communistic. We're tyranny. We're tyrants. So I don't feel like I have a target on my back yet, but
no.
That is a process toward dehumanizing your enemy, and it does make violence more acceptable form.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Republicans are so much better at naming, something nasty, putting a tag on us, like don't think of an elephant. They're way better than Democrats in coming up with a demonizing name, like communist. If you're a Democrat, you're a communist. You're a
we're socialist. Any government.
It's that kind of labeling that they are, and that's part of the playbook. I think
absolutely.
They're just damn good at it.
Well, remember,
demonizing is easier for people who live close to the devil.
Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat.
That's right. Boy.
Holds true today. All right.
Thanks
We're,
for
uh,
coming
we're,
back.
we're over time.